Hello my dear students in our new episode of biology program for the third secondary grade. اهلا بكم ابنائنا وبناتنا طلاب وطالبات الثانويه العامه في حلقه جديده لماده البيولوجي. في بدايه الحلقه اسمحوا لي اقدم لكم مستر يحيى سالم هيقدم معانا الحلقه ان شاء الله. اهلا بك يا مستر يحيى.
اهلا وسهلا بك مستر شريف واهلا باعزائنا طلاب الثانويه العامه.
اهلا بحضرتك. الحقيقه احنا هنبدا مع بعضين دلوقتي شابتر 3 Reproduction in Living Organisms. شابتر Reproduction شابتر كبير شويه في ديتيلز كتيره لكن ما فيهوش حاجه صعبه، يعني ما فيش حد يقدر يقول الجزئيه دي في شابتر 3 صعبه، ما فيش حاجه صعبه، لكن هو كبير يبقى محتاج يتذاكر، محتاج يتعمل عليه ريفيجن باستمرار، محتاج نحل عليه اسئله كويز كتيره كده، ده هيخلي المستوى يفضل عالي وما ينزلش. الحقيقه طبعا احنا نعرف ان الريبرودكشن is not as the other vital activities because the living organism can live or can survive without reproduction or without the reproductive organs. So the first question, what about the importance of reproduction? Mr. Yahya, what is the importance of reproduction?
Actually, Mr. Sharif, reproduction is considered as one of the most important biological processes which are happening inside our bodies, because it is responsible for, number one, increasing our numbers, increasing the number of species, maintain our life, and also it is responsible for maintaining the species of the living organism, Mr.
Yes, if a certain species of the living organism is not reproduced, that means extinction will take place. That leads to pressure of the species of the living organism. But the reproduction keeps the continuous of the species on the earth. So what about the capacity of reproduction? A certain kind of living organism can reproduce with a great number or huge number, but some of them can reproduce with a little number of living organisms. Mr. Yahya, what about the capacity of reproduction?
Actually, Mr. Capacities of living organisms depend on the nature of the living organism, their life, and the nature of the environment in which they are living. This means that whenever they are living in some environments, this environment affects their life. Here is an example. For the aquatic animals or aquatic living organisms which live inside the seas, the progeny, the number of progeny which is produced in the seas is much more than that of their land relatives.
And also terrestrial living organisms.
Yes, Mr. And concerning to the parasites, the number of parasites is more than that of the others because they are exposed to be lost. And also for the primitive ones, in concerning to the primitive ones, they produce a large amount of offspring to compensate the loss of these ones, comparing to the higher ones, Mr.
Yes. So if the living organism exposed to many dangerous situations, that means that increase the rate of reproduction. And also the duration of the life of the living organism affect the rate of reproduction. If the lifetime of the individual is short time, that means that will increase the rate of reproduction. So what about the types of reproduction? There are 3 types of reproduction. The first is called sexual reproduction, which is a production of living organisms with at the presence of 2 parents, male and female, but the asexual reproduction takes place by single parent. The alternation of generation, which is the third type of reproduction, that means the life cycle of the individual includes 2 generations. One of them is produced as a result of sexual reproduction, but the other is produced as a result of asexual reproduction. هنبدأ مع بعضين دلوقتي نشوف first type of reproduction اللي احنا بنقول عليه asexual reproduction as the kind which is common in plant kingdom and some animal kingdom or primitive individuals or species of the animal kingdom. Mr. Yahya, what about the disadvantages of the asexual reproduction?
Actually, Mr. The disadvantages for the asexual reproduction is whenever you're talking about the asexual reproduction, the disadvantages, this means that they are not adapted for the environment. They are not adapted for the environment. يعني الكائن الجديد ما بيقدرش يتكيف مع البيئة الجديدة because they gain the same characters from the parents, from the descendants. So they couldn't adapt with the environment.
That means it is not adapt with the change in the environmental conditions, because asexual reproduction depends on a certain type of cell division, which is called the mitosis division. During the mitosis division, the mother cell divided to produce two cells similar to the mother cell. So the new individuals carry the same characteristics of the parents, so the living organisms that reproduce asexually can't adapt with the changes in the environmental conditions. So what about the types of asexual reproduction? There are 6 types of asexual reproduction. هنبص عليهم كده. أول واحدة اسمها binary fission. Number 2 budding. Number 3 regeneration. Number 4 sporogony. Number 5 parthenogenesis. Number 6 tissue culture. احنا النهارده هنتكلم عن ال 6 types of asexual reproduction اللي قدام حضراتكم دلوقتي. لما اجي ابدا نشوف اول حاجه binary fission، نعرف ان some unicellular organisms or the unicellular organisms can reproduce by binary fission as shown in the screen. The amoeba, the nucleus of the amoeba divided into 2 nuclei. After that, the cytoplasm divided into 2 parts of cytoplasm. So each cytoplasm or each nucleus surrounded by a little amount of cytoplasm and a membrane. So the mother cell divided into 2 cells similar to each other and similar to the mother cell. But the binary fission takes place during the suitable conditions or the favorable conditions. But what about amoeba during unfavorable conditions, Mr. Yahya?
During unsuitable condition, it forms something is called a cyst, Mr. Because these conditions are not suitable for the amoeba, for growing for amoeba. So it divides in binary fission inside something is called a cyst. It forms a chitinous membrane outside the cell itself and divides mitotically by mitosis to form 2 nuclei or 2 cells. And after that divides more and more times to produce a large amount of amoeba, and after that the cyst burst to produce a large amount that spread in the nature.
So this kind of reproduction is called the binary fission. The binary fission takes place in unicellular organisms as amoeba, paramecium, the primitive algae and the bacteria. But the second kind of reproduction is called the budding. In the budding may take place in unicellular or in multicellular. Also, the cells produced in the budding are not equal in size, and the mother cell still appear, but in binary fission the mother cell disappear. قدامنا مستر يحيى دلوقتي بنتكلم عن البادنج in unicellular organisms. What about the budding as a kind of asexual reproduction?
Actually, Mr. Budding and yeast as a unicellular organisms takes place as the mitosis division. Mitosis division takes place inside the yeast fungus as a unicellular organism, and the cell divides mitotically to produce 2 nuclei. One of them migrates or moves to the outer part, which is called a bud, and which
عفوا، هو الكلام اللي موجود اللي بيقوله مستر يحيى موجود على الفيديو اللي قدام حضراتكم دلوقتي، هنبص عليه وازاي اليست بتعمل بادنج. اتفضل يا مستر.
That's it, Mr. Yani the yeast produces or the yeast reproduces by something or a process is called budding, in which part or the nucleus inside the yeast divides mitotically by something is called mitosis. This mitosis produces 2 identical nuclei. One of them migrate to the outer part of the yeast, which is called the bud, which separates later or still in attach or in contact with the yeast to form something is called a colony. But concerning to the other living organisms, like Mr. Like sponges, it is different, Mr.
يبقى زي ما شفنا كده ازاي اليست بتعمل بادنج. كان المفروض نشوفها على السكرين بشكل واضح. انا قدامنا كده ادي نيوكليوس، والنيوكليوس divided into two nuclei where a protrusion takes place which is lateral protrusion at one of the sides of the yeast, and the nucleus divided into two nuclei. One of them migrate to the protrusion and change into complete individual. May the complete individual still attached to the mother cell or can separate to live independently. زي ما البودنج ممكن يحصل اليونيسيلولار، كمان in multicellular as sponges and hydra buds grow from the interstitial cells which divided from one side of the body to form a protrusion. قدام حضراتكم ده شكل الهيدرا. الهيدرا هنا برضو بتعمل reproduction asexual by budding. هنعمل فوكس شوية على البد الصغير اللي بيطلع من الانترستيشيال سيلز. ده البد الصغير دون هيبدأ يحصل له increase. طبعا ده grow from the interstitial cells may separated away from the mother body and live independently away from its mother, or may still attach to the mother. That's kind of reproduction or asexual reproduction by budding. لو حبينا نعمل comparison بين budding و binary fission هتبقى البوينتس اوف comparison واضحه قوي. اني لما اجي اتكلم عن budding the binary fission takes place in unicellular only, but the budding in unicellular and multicellular. The binary fission, the mother cell disappear but still appear in the budding. In the binary fission, the two cells are produced are equal to each other in size, but they are different in size in the case of the budding. The example of the binary fission in amoeba, paramecium, bacteria, some primitive algae, but the other kind of asexual reproduction, which is budding, takes place in unicellular as the yeast, multicellular as the hydra and sponges. ده كان الفيرست كايند and the second kind of the asexual reproduction. دلوقتي هنشوف third kind of asexual reproduction اللي بنقول عليه regeneration. Mr. Yahya, the capacity of regeneration decrease in higher animals. What about the three levels of regeneration?
Regeneration. Actually, Mr. when it comes to regeneration, what's regeneration? What does it mean? يعني ايه regeneration؟ regeneration بنسميه بالعربي كده ان هو الاستعاضة، يعني حاجة لما
تجدد.
تجدد او بنسميه التجدد او الاستعاضة في حالة يعني في بعض الكائنات التانية لما العضو بيتقطع بيتجدد عضو.
يبقى احنا هنبدأ بالليفلز بقى.
بالليفلز عندنا.
Yes, the first.
عشان كده احنا بنقول we have got three types of regeneration in the primitive living organisms, and higher ones and the most higher living organisms. Concerning to the primitive ones is like, you know, Mr. Regeneration sea stores. It's the most famous one, the sea store. يعني whenever it is caught, the sea store, whenever it is caught, it reproduces, producing a new living organism whenever an arm and a part of its central disc is caught. It regenerated again to produce a new sea store. Okay, يعني بنسمي ده اللي احنا بنسميه التجدد لما السي ستور بيتقطع جزء من السنترال ديسك مع الارب وبنرميه مره ثانيه، بنرميه في البحر زي ما كان البريدرز بيعملوا. ايه اللي كان بيحصل؟ انه بيتجدد مره ثانيه وبتكون كائن جديد، سي ستور جديد. لكن concerning to the higher ones, not higher يعني higher than that of these stores like crustaceans اللي هي القشريات، بنلاقي the cup parts just a restoration or restoring of the cup parts، يعني الجزء اللي بيتقطع يعني بيجي مكانه جزء جديد تاني خالص. But concerning to the higher living organisms like humans, like mammalians, it doesn't exceed something like healing of wound, Mr. التئام الجروح.
Yes.
مجرد ان الجرح بيلتئم ده نعتبره نوع من انواع الريجنريشن. By the way, it is not considered as kind of reproduction in case of humans. In case of healing of wound, this is not reproduction, and also in case of crustaceans, this is not kind of reproduction because it does not produce new living organisms, Mister.
Yes, so the level of reproduction, which is the healing of the wounds and the formation of the missing organs that act as a kind of reproduction, act as a kind of regeneration, but not act as a kind of reproduction. The kind of reproduction by regeneration that takes place in the examples as a planaria, sponges, the hydra, the sea star. يبقى دول living organisms as an example can reproduce asexually by regeneration. If the body is cut into several parts, each part can grow to produce complete individual. برضو الاكزامبل اللي عندنا طبعا السي ستار مشهور جدا لل الريجنريشن as a kind of asexual reproduction. بس لكن نمبر 4 هنتكلم عن سبوروجوني. The spore is a single cell formed in the nucleus formed of a nucleus surrounded by a little amount of cytoplasm and a thick coat. When the spore becomes mature, it's liberated and spreads in air. When the spore reaches a suitable medium for growth, it's called ruptured, while it can absorb water and divide several times by mitosis and grow to new individual. So that is the third kind of reproduction by sporogony. The fungi as a bread mold can reproduce by the spores or by sporogony, where by the formation of the mycelium, which containing sporangium, which can divide to produce huge number of spores that spreads in the air. Mr. Yahya, what about the advantages of reproduction by spores?
Reproduction by spores enable the living organism to be spread for long distances around the living organism, and also it produces a great amount of offspring. يعني بيخليه ينتشر لمسافات كتيرة، والتكاثر بيخليه ينتشر لمسافات أكبر وأكبر ويستقل ببيئات أكتر وأكتر, and also produce a great amount of offspring, Mister.
Yes, so the advantages of reproduction by sporogony, number 1, the quick propagation, number 2, tolerance of the hard conditions or the environmental conditions, and can distribute it to great distance. That's the advantages of reproduction by sporogony. But what about the 5th kind of asexual reproduction, which is called the parthenogenesis? Parthenogenesis is the ability of the ovum to develop to produce complete individual without fertilization by male gamete that takes place naturally and artificially. Naturally as the honeybee and the aphid insect, artificially that may take place in frog, in sea star, in rabbits that act as a special kind of parthenogenesis or the artificial parthenogenesis. Mr. Yahya, what about the parthenogenesis in honeybee?
Concerning to parthenogenesis in honeybee, Mister, you know that parthenogenesis in honeybee, you know that, Mister, that honeybee queen is responsible for production of something is called ovum. An ovum is it contains one N chromosome, which is called haploid number, okay? Just is one N chromosomes, okay? Whenever it is fertilized, it produces 2 kinds of honeybees. The first one, which is the queen itself, the second one, which is the worker. This depends on the food that it receives. Whenever it receives the jelly, which is called the royal jelly, it produces the queen. Whenever it feeds on some other kinds of food, is like, you know, the honey, Mister, it produces the workers. But whenever there is no fertilization, this means that the ovum is not fertilized. This means that the drones are produced. This is called parthenogenesis, Mister.
So the formation of workers and the queens that not act as a kind of asexual reproduction, but act as a kind of sexual reproduction.
Yes.
But the asexual reproduction in honeybee is the formation of the drone or the male of the honeybee, because the ovum can develop to produce the male without fertilized by a male gamete. Yes. But the same takes place in the aphid insect as a kind of the natural parthenogens. What about the kind of parthenogens in the aphid insect, and the difference between the parthenogens in the aphid insect and the honeybee?
Yes, mister. When it comes to aphid insect, the aphid insect produces an ovum, but not meiotically, mister. It is produced mitotically by mitosis, not meiosis, mister. This is very important issue for comparison between the honeybee and the aphid, because the ovum for the aphid insect contains 2N chromosomes. So whenever it develops, it forms the adult aphid insect. But concerning to the honeybee, the ovum which is not fertilized, just only produces the drones. But the fertilized one produces the drones or workers. So the ovum in case of honeybee just 1N, but in case of aphid 2N. The ovum in case of aphids is produced by mitosis, but in case of honeybee by meiosis division, mister.
Yes, هفكر حضراتكم بس ان في difference بين meiosis division and mitosis division. لما اقول mitosis division يعني the mother cell divided into two cells similar to the mother cell. يعني لو انا بديت بديبلويد cell يبقى هتديني two diploid cells similar to each other and similar to the mother cell. But in the case of the meiosis division, in meiosis division that means reducing the number of chromosomes to the half number. Means the diploid cell can divide it by meiosis to produce 4 haploid cells or 4 haploid nuclei, each containing the half number of chromosomes of the mother cell. هنبدأ دلوقتي هنشوف ال thick kind of أو هنتكلم عن artificial parthenogenesis. قلنا إن artificial parthenogenesis takes place by the human beings as that of the frog eggs, exposed to heat, electric shocks, radiation, some salts, or pricking the egg or the ovum with needle. This stimuli leads to duplicate their chromosomal number and develop without fertilization to individuals. As in the frog, C star, early embryonic stages of the rabbit. But what about the difference between natural parthenogenesis and artificial parthenogenesis? Mr. Yahya, can we compare between natural parthenogenesis and artificial parthenogenesis?
When it comes to the comparing between artificial parthenogenesis and natural parthenogenesis, artificial parthenogenesis needs stimuli, you know, because the temperature, because the electric shocks or the heated shocks or irrigation of salts or whatever, these stimuli produce egg that has the ability to develop into two N cells that forms later the living organism. But concerning to the natural one, it takes place naturally without having irradiation, without
interfering of the human beings and the other stimuli.
Yes, that's it, mister.
Yes, that's a comparison between natural parthenogenesis and the artificial. But what about the thick kind of asexual reproduction, which is called the tissue culture? Mr. Yahya, what about the asexual reproduction by tissue culture? What about the method of the tissue culture?
Actually, Mr. Tissue culture is considered nowadays one of the most important methods for obtaining new living organisms that are responsible for getting us more and more food, and that is responsible for solving the food problems. So what is tissue culture? Tissue culture, it is a kind of asexual reproduction, okay? It is a kind of asexual reproduction that is responsible for production of new living organism or new offspring without having sex, okay? Mister, just you know, mister, that the cell that you know that the cell contains 2n chromosomes, and 2n chromosomes, the whole hereditary characters inside the living organisms are found inside the nucleus, which is 2n chromosome. Whenever we separate one of those cells and cultivate it in a tissue culture, cultivate it in a medium that contains hormones, يحتوي على الهرمونات, nutrients, المغذيات. لو احنا يعني مجرد انه احنا نفصل مثلا خليه من الخلايا اللي بتحتوي على كل الماده الوراثيه للكائن الحي لايك كاروت وزرعناها في الوسط ده بيحتوي على كل الماده المغذيه وكمان الهرمونز. In this case this living organism cell will be able to develop into a whole living organism, entire living organism, and this one is used for shortening of solving the food problems, Mr.
Yes, so the tissue culture has a certain advantages. The tissue culture can solve the food problem, can shorten the time of cultivation, and also propagate a certain 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 strains that have the resistance to disease, solve food problem, shorten the time of cultivation. احنا كده قلنا مستر يحيى 6 types of asexual reproduction. ممكن نقولهم بسرعة كده كل kind اسمه ايه والاكزامبل بتاعه بس.
We have got 6 kinds or 6 types of asexual reproduction. Number 1 is binary fission. Okay, this is the first one. Binary fission is like amoeba and paramecium. Okay, amoeba and paramecium, they are some examples of binary fission. Okay,
yes, bacteria.
What's binary fission is okay, and yes, also bacteria. What's binary fission? Binary fission means that the living organism, which is a primitive living organism, divides mitotically. Okay, not meiosis.
لا هو احنا شرحنا بس احنا هنقول example الكايند والاكزامبل بس.
Okay, Mr. But number 2, budding is like, you know, budding is like yeast, is like hydra, is like sponges.
Yes.
Number 3, parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis is like, you know, parthenogenesis
naturally
like,
as artificial
as aphid. Sorry, naturally is aphid وكمان honeybee. خلاص
yes.
كده. وممكن artificially is some in frogs, in rabbits, whatever. Okay.
Yes.
وكمان عندنا sprogeny. Sprogeny ده اللي هو بنسميه زي التكاثر بالسبورز والكلام ده كله, is like some algae, is like, you know, Mr. Some fungi, is like some ferns, Mr.
Yes.
Some ferns like Bolybedium and Adiantum will be studied inshallah later.
هنقولها في alternation of generations.
ان شاء الله في alternation in generation ان شاء الله هنشرحها. واخيرا عندنا tissue culture, Mr.
Yes.
It's like, you know, breeding of rare plants or desirable plants, is like, you know, which those who are needed for our daily life. And also this one is done, Mr. in tobacco and carrot plants, Mr.
Yes, of course. احنا بعد ما قلنا ال 6 types of asexual reproduction محتاجين نشوف مجموعة أسئلة كده على الجزء اللي احنا قلناه بتاع ال asexual reproduction ونشوف الانسر بتاع الأسئلة دي تبقى ايه. هنبدأ بأول سؤال كده معانا بيقول لي choose the correct answer. Reproduction differs between living organisms according to dots. Reproduction differs between living organisms according to dots. Number A بيقول لي various campaigns. Number B, age. Number C, life nature. Number D, all the previous. So the right answer is the last answer, which is all the previous, because it depends on the campaigns, the age or the duration, and also the life nature. يبقى دي أول سؤال بيقول لنا كان بيسأل لنا عن سؤال تشوز كده يقول لنا عن ال difference of reproduction. السؤال الثاني بيقول لي budding in unicellular organisms not considered as a binary fission because dots. The question asks about the difference between the budding and the binary fission. The number of offspring is big, ولا the size of the produced cells is not equal, ولا the size of the produced cells is equal, ولا the number of produced cells is equal. باختصار الفرق مش هيبقى في النمبر، لكن هيبقى ان ال size of the produced cells is not equal, because the size of the in the case of the budding, the big cell which is the mother cell and the bud which is small one, but in the case of the binary fission the two cells are produced are similar in size. السؤال بعد كده بيقول لي in bacteria, yeast and hydra the binary fission budding or regeneration occur by dots. بيسألنا عن ال types of asexual reproduction by binary fission, budding and regeneration that takes place by mitosis division ولا by meiotic division ولا parthenogenesis ولا gamete formation. طبعا احنا كنا قلنا ان all the types of asexual reproduction takes place by mitosis division because it produces individuals similar to the mother cell or the single parent. السؤال اللي بعده برضو بيقول لي choose the correct answer. Sporogony is common in the following organisms except dots: furnace, bread mold, hydra, mushroom. طبعا لما اجي اقول ان هو is not common يبقى بنتكلم في الهيدرا because sporogony takes place by furnace, bread mold, mushroom. السؤال اللي بعده كده برضو هيقابلني choose برضو question. بيقول لي the egg of the aphid insect contains the dots number of chromosomes of the somatic cell in female aphid. بيسألني عن ال egg of aphid insect containing كام number equals the number of the cells of the somatic cells ولا half ولا the same ولا double. quarter ولا half ولا the same ولا double. طبعا هيبقى the same because it produced as a result of mitosis division which produced cells similar to the mother cell. السؤال اللي بعد كده بيقول لي in the experiment of tissue culture the cells of carrot plant grow in a conical flask containing dots: liquid nitrogen, coconut milk, digestive enzymes, hormones. Hello my dear students in our new episode of biology program for the third secondary grade. اهلا بكم ابنائنا وبناتنا طلاب وطالبات الثانويه العامه في حلقه جديده لماده البيولوجي. في بدايه الحلقه اسمحوا لي اقدم لكم مستر يحيى سالم هيقدم معانا الحلقه ان شاء الله. اهلا بك يا مستر يحيى.
اهلا وسهلا بك مستر شريف، واهلا باعزائنا طلاب الثانويه العامه.
اهلا بحضرتك. الحقيقه احنا هنبدا مع بعضين دلوقتي شابتر 3 Reproduction in Living Organisms. Hello my dear students in our new episode of biology program for the third secondary grade. اهلا بكم ابنائنا وبناتنا طلاب وطالبات الثانويه العامه في حلقه جديده لماده البيولوجي. في بدايه الحلقه اسمحوا لي اقدم لكم مستر يحيى سالم هيقدم معانا الحلقه ان شاء الله. اهلا بك يا مستر يحيى.
اهلا وسهلا بك مستر شريف، واهلا باعزائنا طلاب الثانويه العامه.
اهلا بحضرتك. الحقيقه احنا هنبدا مع بعضين دلوقتي شابتر 3 Reproduction in Living Organisms. شابتر Reproduction شابتر كبير شويه، في ديتيلز كتيره لكن ما فيهوش حاجه صعبه. يعني ما فيش حد يقدر يقول الجزئيه دي في شابتر 3 صعبه، ما فيش حاجه صعبه، لكن هو كبير يبقى محتاج يتذاكر، محتاج يتعمل عليه ريفيجن باستمرار، محتاج نحل عليه اسئله كويز كتيره كده. ده هيخلي المستوى يفضل عالي وما ينزلش. الحقيقه طبعا احنا نعرف ان ال reproduction is not as the other vital activities because the living organism can live or can survive without reproduction or without the reproductive organs. So the first question, what about the importance of reproduction? Mr. Yahya, what is the importance of reproduction?
Actually, Mr. Sharif, reproduction is considered as one of the most important biological processes which are happening inside our bodies, because it is responsible for, number one, increasing our numbers, increasing the number of species, maintain our life, and also it is responsible for maintaining the species of the living organism, Mr.
Yes, if a certain species of the living organism is not reproduced, that means extinction will take place. That leads to pressure of the species of the living organism. But the reproduction keeps the continuous of the species on the earth. So what about the capacity of reproduction? A certain kind of living organism can reproduce with a great number or huge number, but some of them can reproduce with a little number of living organisms. Mr. Yahya, what about the capacity of reproduction?
Actually, Mr. Capacities of living organisms depend on the nature of the living organism, their life, and the nature of the environment in which they are living. This means that whenever they are living in some environments, this environment affects their life. Here is an example. For the aquatic animals or aquatic living organisms which live inside the seas, the progeny, the number of progeny which is produced in the seas is much more than that of their land relatives. And
so
also
are called terrestrial living organisms.
Yes, Mr. And concerning to the parasites, the number of parasites is more than that of the others because they are exposed to be lost. And also for the primitive ones, in concerning to the primitive ones, they produce a large amount of offspring to compensate the loss of these ones, comparing to the higher ones, Mr.
Yes. So if the living organism exposed to with thick coat formed of a nucleus and a little amount of cytoplasm.
This is called the spore, Mr.
The spore is a single cell containing a nucleus with a little amount of cytoplasm and thick coat. The next question, the ability of the living organism to grow into new individual if cutting into several pieces. If each piece can grow and develop to produce complete individual, what about this kind of reproduction, Mr. Yahya?
It is called the regeneration.
Regeneration as a kind of asexual reproduction. The next, what would happen in each of the following cases? Exposure of frog eggs to heat shocks. Mr. Yahya, what about the result of the exposing the frog egg to the heat shocks or breaking with needle or jerking or something like that?
Actually, Mr., this is called artificial parthenogenesis because whenever it is exposed to heat or a temperature or whatever, irradiation or breaking of needle, this enhances, stimulates the cell which is ovum here, which is ovule, which is ovum to be developed.
Yes.
Okay. So this is called artificial parthenogenesis.
Yes. So the stimulus or the stimuli allow the ovum to develop to produce complete individual that without the presence of the fertilization process. So that's called the artificial parthenogenesis. The next question, exposing the amoeba to unsuitable conditions. What will take place of the amoeba if it exposed to unfavorable conditions?
Actually, Mr. Amoeba, there are two cases in reproduction in amoeba. Amoeba, in the case of suitable conditions, it reproduces by binary fission, okay? It divides mitotically into two identical halves or identical cells, which is spread in the nature, okay, in the environment. But in case of the unsuitable conditions, الظروف الغير ملائمة, is like temperature, is like cold temperature, high temperature, whatever, irradiation and whatever, okay? What happens? The cell over here, the amoeba over here, produces something is called the cyst. The cyst is a chitinous membrane around the amoeba itself is produced, and it divides mitotically over here, تنقسم mitotically to produce a great number of amoeba inside the cyst. Whenever the conditions become better, the breast burst, the membrane burst to produce these new cells, Mr.
Yes, so the rupture of the coat of the cyst takes place and new small amoeba will release that act as a kind of asexual reproduction because it takes place by single parent and also by mitosis division. السؤال اللي بعده عندنا بيقول لي choose from column B what suits for the column A. هنشوف مع بعضنا column A بيقول ايه و column B بيقول ايه، واحنا بنقول بعد ما نقول column A هيبقى سهل نختار على طول من column B. هنا reproduction in amoeba occurs by dots. طبعا amoeba يبقى على طول احنا فاكرين من هنا هيبقى binary fission. هنا reproduction in yeast occur by ايه؟ على طول انت عارف ان في bud. وبعد كده the asexual reproduction in occur by هنا occur by ممكن يبقى في لما نتكلم عن السexual reproduction هيبقى في لكن ممكن طبعا تبقى by binary fission. نشوف الانسر اللي عندنا هنا. هتبقى الانسر بالشكل ده. binary fission is the way of reproduction in ده سؤال تاني برضو بيقول لي choose from the column B what suits for column A. برضو column A بس هنا بيجيب لي type of asexual reproduction in column A وبعدين بيديني الاكزامبل in column B. في ايه بيقول لي binary fission وبعدين budding regeneration sporogony parthenogenesis وبعدين tissue culture. هنا في بي بيقول لي the way of reproduction in honey bee and the aphid insect. على طول يبقى انا مضطر اروح ل parthenogenesis number 5. هنا the way reproduction in bread mold and mushroom يبقى انا هدور على number 4 sporogony. number C بيقول لي the way of reproduction in carrot and tobacco يبقى انا هروح عند number 6 tissue culture. the way of reproduction in amoeba and paramecium يبقى هنا بيتكلم في binary fission number 1. وبعدين بيقول لي the way of reproduction in yeast hydra is A. طب يبقى هنا عند اليست وعند الهيدرا by budding. ده كان سؤال بتاعنا اللي هو كان ماتش او تشوز فروم كولم A تو كولم B. هنستقبل تليفون من نادين من المنصورة. نادين اهلا بيكي.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
ممكن اسال حضرتك سؤال؟
بس استاذنك تعلي صوتك شويه، اتفضلي.
choose the correct answer.
choose the correct answer.
the substance.
طب هستأذنك تقولي ببطء عشان احنا هنكتب السؤال. مستر يحيى هنكتب السؤال او ابدأي بقى قولي السؤال كده.
the substance.
the substance.
that play.
that
play.
that play. ايوه.
a common
role
between.
common role in ايه؟ between ايوه. the structural support and physiological support مش كده؟ طيب عايزه تدينا التشويس ولا احنا نقول على طول؟ قولي التشويس حضرتك. سيليولوز
ولا كيوتين.
ايه التانية؟ كيوتين. ليجنين
ولا
all the previous. طيب يبقى انت عايزه ايه اللي بلاي ا كومن رول بين الفسيولوجيكال سبورت والستراكشرال سبورت؟ طب في اسئله تاني معاكي؟ اتفضلي.
كنت عايزه اعرف بس الرسمه بتاعت الاكيليس تندون.
الاكيليس تندون مش بتعرفي ترسمي الرسمه بتاعت الاكيليس تندون؟ طيب هنرسمها لحضرتك حاضر دلوقتي. في اسئله تانية مع حضرتك؟
لا شكرا ميرسي جدا.
اوكي ميرسي لحضرتك، اشكرك. هنبدا السؤال الاول. مستر يحيى بيقول لي تشوز ذا كوريكت انسر وبيقول لي في سيلولوز كيوتين ليجنين all the previous. what about the substances that act as or play an important role in structural support and physiological support?
Again, Mr. Please, the choices.
Yes.
The choices over here are what?
Cellulose.
But the substance that play a common role between the structural support and physiological support.
Yes.
Number 1.
Cellulose.
Kyotin. Lignin.
All the previous.
Yes. I think, Mr. It's all the previous. It's my rule.
هو الحقيقه بس انا عايز افكر حضراتكم. هو السؤال المفروض انا لما اقول سيلولوز واقول كيوتين واقول ليجنين الحقيقه هم دول some substance deposited on the cellule. بس لو انا هتكلم عن physiological support يعني ووتر، يعني انا هركز what about the substance that can decrease or prevent the evaporation of water from the plant. يبقى انا هنا مضطر اختار كيوتين because the kyotin layer decrease or reduce the amount of water from the plant which act as a physiological support. يعني انا كل ما هزود السيكنس بتاع الكيوتين هيبقى اللوزنج اوف ووتر قليل، كل ما هيبقى السيكنس بتاع الكيوتين هيبقى اكتر، هيبقى اللوزنج اوف ووتر يعني هيتغير. يعني هنا الاماونت اوف ووتر depends on the thickness of kyotin layer، فعشان كده هنختار الكيوتين لاير. لكن لو انا قلت سيلولوز والليجنين دول ستراكشر سبورت بحت تماما، فمش هتكلم فيهم. احنا هنرجع طيب للاسئله بتاعتنا يا مستر يحيى. طيب السؤال اللي بعده بيقول لي compare between sexual and asexual reproduction. احنا الحقيقه اتكلمنا عن السexual reproduction واتكلمنا عن الاسexual reproduction.
Sexual reproduction as sexual reproduction, Mr.
احنا الحقيقه هنشوف الادفانتج او السكشوال ريبرودكشن، وكل نقطه من السكشوال ريبرودكشن هنشوف الاسكشوال ريبرودكشن بتاعتها. عند السكشوال ريبرودكشن هنا it takes place by two parents، طبعا ميل اند فيميل، لكن عند الاسكشوال ريبرودكشن takes place by one parent. السكشوال ريبرودكشن هنا فيوجن بين جاميتس، يعني لازم يحصل بالجاميتس، لكن السكشوال ريبرودكشن don't need the presence of gametes. طالما في جاميتس في السكشوال ريبرودكشن يبقى الجاميتس are formed by meiosis division or meiotic division to produce gametes. لكن الاسكشوال ريبرودكشن طبعا الميثود هنا او الريبرودكشن takes place by mitosis division. عند السكشوال ريبرودكشن هنا it is a source of genetic variation، لأن في مايوزس، والمايوزس بيدي different cells، وبالتالي هنا بيبقى في genetic variation، لكن no genetic variation in the case of asexual reproduction. طبعا ال sexual reproductions of spring are different، لكن في ال asexual reproduction are similar because they produced from single parent by mitosis division. السكشوال reproduction they can adapt to new conditions، لكن هنا can't adapt to the changes in the environmental conditions. Sexual reproduction takes place in higher plants or higher organisms، هنا takes place in lower organism. هنا عند السكشوال reproduction it need long time and high amount of energy for maturation and pregnancy، لكن in the case of asexual reproduction it needs short time and need small amount of energy. عند الجزء بتاع sexual reproduction it need to it need to higher organisms that will need high biological cost, and also that high biological cost to allow the individual to need to reach the sexual maturity. لكن عند الasexual reproduction هنا it need high biological cost not need high biological cost، يعني low biological cost in the asexual reproduction because all the individuals can reproduce. لكن عند السكشوال the females only can reproduce. الحقيقه الكومباريزون اللي بين السكشوال وبين الاسكشوال ريبرودكشن كبيره، فيها نقط كتيره، مش كومن ان انا اقول لك اعمل كومبير بين سكشوال ريبرودكشن واسكشوال ريبرودكشن واسكت، لكن لازم اقول لك ان ذا تيرمز اوف كذا وكذا وكذا علشان تختار لحضرتك النقط اللي احنا محتاجين ان انت تجاوب لنا عليها او ان انت تبقى عارفها. لكن طبعا ان جنرال لازم احنا نبقى عارفين كل النقط بتاعه الديفرنس او بتاع الكومباريزونز اللي احنا بنعمل. وغالبا طبعا الكومباريزون بيبقى بيتكلم عن الديفرنس اللي بين الحاجتين اللي انا بعمل بينهم كومباريزون، مش بيتكلم عن السيميلاريتيز. هنبدا نتكلم مستر يحيى عن التايب اوف sexual reproduction by conjugation in Spirogyra.
Yes, Mr.
اتفضل.
Types of conjugation of Spirogyra, you know, Mr. Concerning to sexual reproduction, concerning to sexual reproduction اللي هو التكاثر الجنسي، احنا عندنا فيه اكتر من شكل by gametes اللي هي الجاميتس، يعني عن طريق الجاميتات، or by something is called conjugation, Mr. Conjugation اللي هو بنسميه الاقتران. خلاص، فبيكون في lateral conjugation وفي نوع تاني اللي هو اسمه scalar form conjugation.
Yes.
This means that lateral conjugation, the protoplasm of the cell inside the cell of the Spirogyra migrates laterally from one cell to another, okay, to produce 2N chromosomes, okay, Mr. Or to produce yes, okay. So we have got here two types of conjugation, Mr. Sharif.
Yes. احنا الحقيقه conjugation احنا لما جينا نتكلم عن الاسexual reproduction قلنا 6 types of asexual reproduction. لكن لما اجي اتكلم عن sexual reproduction هتكلم عن two types of sexual reproduction بس. هنتكلم عن sexual reproduction by conjugation دلوقتي، وبعد كده هنتكلم عن type of sexual reproduction by gametes. الحقيقة conjugation ليه مش بنقول عليها gametes؟ لأن دول unicellular organisms or living organisms where there is no differentiation between the two fused cells. The two fused cells are not males or not male and female, but may one of them called the positive cell and the other negative one, but that's in general the kind of sexual reproduction that's called the conjugation. If the conjugation takes place between two lateral ribbons in the unsuitable conditions or unfavorable conditions, that's called the scalariform conjugation due to the formation of conjugation tube between the two parallel ribbons. But in the case of the conjugation by the lateral conjugations that takes place between two neighboring cells in the same ribbon also during the unsuitable conditions. الحقيقة لما أبص للconjugation هلاقي ان في سيل وسيل تاني عملوا فيوجن وعملوا لي زيجوت. الحقيقه ده كده مش بنتكلم في ريبرودكشن يعني increase the number of individuals. لكن لما كل اتنين يعملوا واحده ده كده مش بنقول عليه ريبرودكشن. لكن هو الريبرودكشن مش هيبقى في حكايه الفيوجن او الفورميشن اوف زيجوت، لا هيبقى يبدا من اول ما الزيجوت ده هيعمل كوت يبقى زيجوسبور. زيجوسبور can tolerate the hard conditions or the unsuitable conditions and can still in a dormant stage many times. When the conditions become suitable, that means germination takes place of the zygospore and ribbon grow from the zygospore and can divide it by mitosis. That's act as a kind of asexual reproduction by binary fission. يبقى العادي ان السبايروجايرا لما يبقى فيه suitable conditions هتعمل reproduction by binary fission. لكن unsuitable conditions هي هنا عايزة تعمل protect the species or protect the living organism against extinction. يبقى هنا مضطر يلجأ لحكاية الconjugation in spirogyra. خلينا نبص مع بعضنا كده في الشكل اللي قدامنا ده بيوريني ان دول two parallel ribbons، وبعدين ابتدى the protoplasm of one of the two cells migrate through the conjugation tube to the next one to form zygote. الزيجوت بيعمل حواليه كوت ويبقى زيجوسبور، والزيجوسبور ده can tolerate the hard conditions, can spread to great distance, can divide it during the suitable condition to produce great number of individuals. دي الرسمة اللي موجودة في الكتاب اللي بيكلمني عن scalariform conjugation. ممكن مستر يحيى نتكلم عن السكالاريفورم كونجوجيشن اللي موجود قدامنا دلوقتي على الرسم بيحصل فيه ايه؟
طيب بالنسبة للسكالاريفورم اللي موجود قدامنا على الرسم مستر، طبعا احنا عارف ان السكالاريفورم معناها انه احنا عندنا two filaments of the spirogyra every one contains a number of cells for each other beside each other. ايه اللي بيحصل؟ اللي بيحصل انه عندي اتنين filaments close to each other بيقتربوا من بعضهم البعض، وبعدين اللي بيحصل بعد كده انه البروتوبلازم بيحصل له عمليه كانه بيتكور خلاص كده كانه، وبعدين بيحصل بيتكون قناه between the two cells.
يعني طبعا بتبدا ببروتروجن، والبروتروجن انكريس
ده مجرد نتوء كده
adhere to each other.
بعد كده اللي بيحصل ان الممبرين between the two cells disappear بيختفي تماما.
The wall and the membrane form the conjugation tube.
بالظبط كده. بعد كده البروتوبلازم بيحصل له عمليه ان هو بيتكور، بيحصل كانه هو بيعمل زي الكوره كده، بعد بينتقل. هو طبعا بيبقى 1 in chromosomes.
ده
مختلف جدا. مختلف عن باقي الليفنج اورجانيزمز. يعني المفترض ان هو بيبقى diploid number، لكن هو هنا haploid number. طيب it transfer from the first filament بيروح للسكند filament. بعد ما بيروح للسكند filament بيتكون بعد كده اللي هو حاجه اسمها الزيجوسبور. الزيجوسبور بعد اللي هو بيتكون كده الزيجوسبور بعد كده بيحصل الديفيجن ميتوسيس ديفيجن عشان يتكون نيو فيلامنت اجين وتمشي الدوره مره ثانيه.
كويس. هو الحقيقه هو scalariform means the shape appear during the conjugation as a ladder. due to the presence of two sides, and the conjugation tubes act as the rungs of the ladder. So the migration of the protoplasm of one of the two filaments to the cell of the neighboring one that act, or the other one on the other filament, that's act as a kind of or act as a shape as that which is called the ladder or scalariform shape. But the other kind of the conjugation that's called the lateral conjugation, which takes place between two neighboring cells in the same ribbon, where the protoplasm can migrate through the wall between the two cells to fused with the other one to form the zygote, and also the zygote surround itself with the thick coat to form the zygospore. The zygospore can tolerate the hard conditions. The protoplasm of one cell moves to the adjacent cells through an opening in the wall in between them. مهم قوي ان احنا نعرف نرسم السكالاريفورم كونجوجيشن ونعرف نرسم اللاترال كونجوجيشن. لو عملنا احصائيه صغيره كده هنلاقي ان اللاترال كونجوجيشن جه في الامتحان يمكن اكتر كتير من السكالاريفورم، علشان ده مش محتاج وقت كتير ومش محتاج يعني سكيلز عاليه علشان نعرف نرسم. ابناء وبنات طلاب وطالبات الثانويه العامه، دي كان اخر جزء في الحلقه بتاعتنا النهارده. بشكر مستر احياء اللي نورني النهارده. اهلا بيك يا مستر يحيى. شكرا لحضراتكم، وان شاء الله نلتقي الثلاث الجاي في نفس الميعاد. شكرا لحضراتكم والى اللقاء.